With workouts like high rocks becoming more popular, I'm answering the question today as to what is better for fat loss, cardio or weights training. In this video, I'm also going to be sharing one of the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to fat loss that will make a massive difference on the amount of definition that you will have at the end of your transformation. Now, one thing that people often consider when they're choosing between cardio or weights is how many calories they're going to be burning in a workout, with the general view that more is going to be better. On average, we could assume that a typical weights workout, depending on your gender, your body weight, your training intensity, might burn anywhere between 150 to 350 calories over a 1 hour time frame. Whereas a cardio workout, for example, going on the Stairmaster, jogging, going on a rowing machine, the bike, whatever it might be, over that same 1 hour period, you might burn somewhere between 400 and 600 calories, so quite a considerable amount more. So if when we're doing cardio over the same time frame, we're burning considerably more calories, then that probably means that we should lean more into cardio, right? Well, actually, there's quite a lot more here for us to consider if we want to have an aesthetic, athletic look once we get to the end of our fat loss transformation. I want you to imagine two guys that have been through a fat loss journey. Both of them started at 100 kilograms and they both lost 25 kg. So now, after their transformation, they both weigh 75 kilograms. However, male number one has a muscle mass of 55 kilograms and male number two has a muscle mass of 45 kilograms. Whilst both of these guys do have the same body weight, we can imagine that where male number one has an additional 10 kilograms of muscle mass, that the aesthetic to his look is going to be much better than male number two, who has 10 kilograms less. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you on the screen now a real-time example of this from my own journey going through health and fitness. And the picture on the left here is from 2018. At this point, I had probably lost about 10 to 15 kilos from my heaviest point. And the way that I had done that was purely through dieting and cardio. So strength training, weights training, focusing on getting stronger every single week. That was not something that was part of my routine whatsoever. It was purely cardio. And we can see here from the difference between the picture on the left and the picture on the right, which was taken just before I did my most recent photo shoot. That was actually in 2023, so nearly a couple of years ago now, that whilst I weigh exactly the same, 74 kilograms in both pictures, the overall look is very, very different. And that's what we've got to consider when we're going through a transformation, is not just weight loss, but also fat loss, because we want to be at that end result where we've got that toned and aesthetic look to our physique, rather than just cutting weight down at any expense and ending up at that point where I was on the picture on the left, where I would almost refer to myself as what's called skinny fat, where I'm not necessarily overweight, I'm not out of shape from a health perspective, but I also don't really have a look where when I take my top off or I'm at the beach where I'm going to feel confident in the way that I look. And this is where leaning into cardio purely because it burns more calories can become a really short-sighted approach. Because yes, while calories burned are important, when we've got a goal of not just losing weight, but actually creating a physique that looks good as well, we need to really ensure that we have a good base level foundation of muscle to our physique, because the whole idea is if you want to get toned, you want to get defined, well, to be toned, you've got to have muscle that's going to show against the skin when you start to strip that body fat away. So if all we're thinking about when we're looking at the exercise perspective is what burns more calories, what's going to make me lose weight faster, then yes, you might end up at that end weight a bit quicker than how I got to that second picture, for example. However, the look is just not going to be anywhere near as good, and that's what we need to think about. Now, what I would add as a disclaimer is on that picture on the right, I had been through various bulking and cutting back down phases in dieting and training to get to that stage where I had that muscle. However, it wouldn't be really relevant what I did had I not been doing weights training, as that is what had built the muscle to get there. So the point stays very much the same and is extremely relevant. In terms of how I would set up that weights training program when you've got a goal of fat loss, it really depends on a few things, from your experience level, the amount of time that you have to go to the gym, perhaps how much enjoyment you've got from the gym, your work schedule, stress levels, all sorts of different things can come into play. But for me, I generally, for my clients, tend to program between one of two options, which is either a full body workout split, where you would train, for example, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Thursday, Sunday. Doesn't really matter as long as you have a full rest day in between each workout, because we're potentially going to be hitting the same body parts again. Or alternatively, I would work on a 4-day split where we're doing upper, lower. So for example, Monday and Thursday, I'm working upper body. Tuesday and Friday, I'm working lower body, with 2 full rest days in between where we're getting a bit more volume on each body part. And by following a split like that, either that full body split or the upper lower split, which I have done both, so I have experience with training with both of these styles, what's really important is we're going to ensure that we're actually hitting each muscle group multiple times across the course of the week, which from that volume perspective is going to ensure that we're working that muscle hard enough to create enough stimulus, which is going to build muscle and again give us that defined, toned, athletic physique that we're trying to build. Now, with our goal of fat loss, we need to remember that unless we are in a calorie deficit, it is literally irrelevant what we do. We will not see progress from a fat loss perspective. And it doesn't matter if you're eating super healthy foods. If the volume of the amount of foods that you're consuming is wrong, then you will not see physical changes. And this is a mistake that I made for a long time. I thought that if I went and I prepped chicken, rice, broccoli, healthy foods like that, then I would see changes to my physique. And I'm not trying to say that food quality and food choices aren't important, because they play a massive role in seeing physical changes. However, when it comes to fat loss, the number of calories that you're consuming is a really, really key part of that. And as I say, even if you're eating super healthy foods, if the total volume of calories you're consuming over the course of the week takes you out of that deficit, then you are not going to see the progress from the fat loss perspective. So that's where it's really important that we have the number of calories that we're consuming on point as well. However, what I would add is this is where I like to use cardio to our advantage. My preference when I'm setting up a diet, whether it's for myself or whether it's for a client going through a fat loss transformation, is I like to keep calories as high as I possibly can while still seeing fat loss each week. And the reason why I like to keep calories higher rather than going a bit more aggressive on the calorie side of things is because I find that from an enjoyment perspective, from the element of having freedom of more food choices and just being able to generally stay consistent, because ultimately fat loss does take time, and if we're not consistent over a long period, we're not going to see results. That's something which I find just overall compliance becomes much easier to stick with when we've got a bit more room to play with our calories consumed. So by using cardio, we can look to increase our energy expenditure by adding cardio sessions, low intensity, steady state cardio that's not going to generate a huge amount of fatigue. Perhaps at the end of our weights workouts, you could do something like 3 20 to 30 minute Stairmaster sessions or on the bike. It doesn't really matter what you do, and that can help us keep our calories a bit higher, still be able to have a bit more room for movement on the food side of things, but also create that slightly more aggressive approach still in terms of the deficit that we want. And another way that we could do that as well is by increasing our step count. So if you're doing 10k as a weekly average, you might be able to bump that up to 12 or 13, or sometimes I even go as close or as high as 15 if you've got the time. I know that is a big part with steps, but using cardio and steps, I'm sort of including steps in cardio here, can be a really useful tool to allow us to keep food higher when we're going through our fat loss transformation. The other thing with keeping food higher as well is it's going to really help with keeping the intensity of your training sessions high whilst you're in a calorie deficit. Obviously, when you haven't got a huge amount of food, then it can make it hard to keep pushing, to keep trying to either progress or maintain the level that your lifts were at, because that's really important whether you're a slight newbie into training who might be able to build muscle whilst you're in a deficit, or at the very least we want to ensure that we keep as much of the muscle mass that we do have in a deficit. If we're not able to actually push ourselves in the gym because we're hammering our calorie deficit so hard, that is again going to have a detrimental effect to that overall end look that you get to at the end of the cut. Now, depending on your rate of loss and how quickly you're seeing progress each week, you could then, as you go through the process, start to look at increasing steps every month or so, or increasing the cardio, perhaps in terms of the length of the sessions or the frequency of them as well. That is something that I'm generally quite happy with, because cardio, when it's low intensity steady state, and what I mean by that is, you know, you could maintain a conversation, probably like a 6 out of 10 difficulty. The level of fatigue that generates is actually quite low. It's probably not going to heavily impact training, but that is where we do want to think on the weight side of things. It doesn't have that same effect. More is definitely not better with weights, and that isn't something that I would recommend, to just add more and more weight sessions, because the fatigue from that will be much higher. And if you try and push that beyond the point that you're able to recover, firstly, it's not going to be beneficial from the perspective of maintaining or seeing new muscle mass, but also you risk pushing yourself into that overtrained state where you end up losing motivation, you're not sleeping well, that impacts your recovery, and potentially your immune system comes run down. So that's a nasty spot to get to, and that's the thing that I would say is we can't just add more weight and expect a better result. It definitely doesn't work that way. What I think we can take from this overall is that when you're looking at cardio and weights, we probably shouldn't be looking at this through the lens of cardio versus weights, or which is better, is cardio better or is weights better. It's more looking at it from a perspective that if we can make all of these things work together, that's going to help get us to our end result and see the best possible look in the shortest time frame. And the way that I see it is that our weights training should be the primary focus. That is essentially what we are using to build the foundations of our physique, and things like cardio and diet and steps are different levers that we can pull throughout the different stages that we go through of our transformation to help push things a little bit further. But we want to be using strength training to build the muscle, which again, like I say, will be that foundation, and then just using things like cardio to help create perhaps a slightly bigger deficit when we need to, or to help us break through plateaus, as opposed to using cardio for the main approach with our training that we're using to try and burn fat. Because like I say, that's how we end up in that position with the pictures that I showed you at the start, where we don't have the look that we want. And that is really that major mistake that I was referring to at the start of this video, which is leaning far too much into cardio when you're trying to lose fat. And even workouts such as high rocks or HIIT style workouts that use weights are not effective ways to build muscle. You need to have a structured program which is focused solely around strength training, because if you're trying to incorporate cardio and strength at the same time as part of a workout to a certain point. Perhaps when you're new, you will see benefits from that and you will perhaps build some muscle. But when we're looking at what's required from our training in terms of intensity and going to failure, we really need to have a specific approach to our programming and our style of training that's going to be the most conducive with hypertrophy and building muscle and seeing changes to the way that we look. And my opinion has always been that I think workouts like high rocks or classes, HIIT training, that type of thing, they're really great for just general health and fitness. If you want to improve your performance, you want to improve your cardio, but if your goal is solely around aesthetics and improving the way that you look, you really need to be leaning into weights training, because that is going to be what transforms your physique and gives you that muscle that will create the tone and definition once you strip the fat away. If you need help with how to set out your program for your lifestyle, your commitments, you're not really sure where to go, but you want to get in great shape this year, then head to the link in the description, apply for one-to-one coaching, and I'll come straight back to you with more information.